Scanning for audio.
Welcome to a Tin Dog podcast. This time talking about this week's Doctor Who, number 4 in 2017's series Knock Knock. Yes, just like all of the other podcasters, I have decided not to do the obvious knock knock, who's there gag, despite the fact that that's quite clearly why it's there. I mean, even the guy introducing the BBC ident did the gag. Yeah, shall we just leave that there? I think we should. Now, clearly, there's a few rules when it comes to Doctor Who, and we are only up to episode 4. Now, last week, we had the death of a small child. This week, as the story progressed, oh yeah, we got the death of many, many characters. More about that in a bit, obviously. But of course, as time was going by, you were going, these are all Bill's mates. It's a bit of bloodthirstiness. Is this the new direction for Doctor Who? Is lots and lots of people die? But obviously, no. So that means these people can come back. Now, the reason that I'm intrigued by this is one specific thing that was in the press release, but it wasn't in the actual programme. It was edited out. One of the characters, bizarrely called Harry, is apparently related to Harry Sullivan. That's his grandfather. Harry Sullivan, the idiot Harry Sullivan, as Siobhan Galachon would refer to him, would be, well, not an idiot at all. He's a doctor. He's also the person apparently responsible for the germ warfare that could destroy all of the Zygons that's in the Zygon story. He's still working in, well, chemical warfare. So, he's got a bit of cash and can therefore afford his grandchild to go to a nice university. Now, the reason that it struck me as odd that the guy called Harry was related to Harry, fair enough, is that when he's walking up the stairs and gets, well, let's so call it, partially eaten, it looked almost shot for shot like the clam that attacks Harry and grabs his foot in Genesis of the Daleks. So much so that it makes you go, oh yeah, nice reference. But of course there's lots and lots and lots of other references. On the subject of references, can I just ask you, I know you've been paying attention, let's face it, you're listening to the Tin Dog podcast, I know you've been paying attention. David Bowie references. I know that in this episode there was definitely a Bowie track in the vinyl collection, and then You're Happy, I'm Happy, We're All Happy kind of thing was another Bowie reference. But I'm sure there's one per episode. So if you could email me with the set of 4, that would be marvellous. Saying that the pilot dressed a bit like Ziggy Stardust just doesn't quite do it for me. I'm sure there's an actual proper reference to it out there. But that's, again, something for another time. There's loads of things I've been missing. I'm thinking of having a podcast at the end of the series called Stuff I Missed, because let's face it, Stuff I Missed is an important thing, an important part of all podcasting. I got the name of the destination, the spaceship, wrong. I mean, apparently it was based on an old novel. It came out at the same time as The Coming Race. Something about a utopia. Was it Now Here or Nowhere? And that reminds me of a whole Fleetwood Mac album insert. But again, that's not important. I am beyond rambling. So, Doctor Who does ghost stories. Now, this is a bit of a ghost story-tastic time, because not only have we got this particular story coming out on TV, but we've also got a remarkably good audio with Tom Baker. Also a ghost story, also science versus superstition. But of course, that's a lot more traditional, a lot more classic. So if you feel deep down that this story didn't quite do it for you, dig that out. But I'll review that later. I'm here to talk about TV Doctor Who. And of course, the shining thing in this dodgy version of Psycho, let's face it, his mother's not stuffed, but she is now made of wood, and is hidden away from all and sundry, and is a murderer. In this dodgy sci-fi version of Psycho, the Landlord is by far the single greatest character. The Landlord is by far the single greatest character. David Suchet is managing to produce something stunning, something fabulous, something well thought out, and at least, well, interesting. Yes, he's a stunning actor, and yes, years ago he would have made a fantastic choice to play the Doctor. No questions asked on that one. But he's not exactly typecast. Let's face it, he's been acting his socks off for decades. But as a villain, well, and this will only affect me, not you, he did look remarkably like my granddad. Remarkably. He had exactly the same hair and the same, it doesn't matter, mannerisms. What does matter is that no one died. Not everyone, except, if you think about it, it's only the people who died this time. The earlier people, there just wasn't enough energy to bring them back. The 20-year cycle thing doesn't make sense. Initially, you think, oh, it must be a constant feeding. But then you go, well, if there was a constant disappearing of people, someone would notice. Someone would kick off. So there has to be, from a writer's point of view, something of a gap between everyone disappearing. And I love the idea of randomly taking Polaroids in order to show you, as a literal found footage kind of thing, what went on. So I reckon all of Bill's housemates will reappear, and they'll come back and they'll be startling, and perhaps there'll be a line about Harry at some point. Yes, the shared house thing makes sense. And rather oddly, I've read that the haunted house itself is the same one that's in Blink, which is now apparently a guest house, and you can go and stay there, and it looks like neither of them. I wonder if the guest house happens to belong to one of the production crew, or at least their friends, because it is a stunning house. Did I enjoy it? Yes, of course I did, but so did you. Was it the greatest Doctor Who story ever? I don't think so. But that's no fault of its own. That's because last week was thin ice. You surround something with thin ice, well, it's not going to be as good, despite its failings. Now, bear with me. When Doctor Who does ghost stories, there's always a challenge. You see, Doctor Who is definitely a science-based thing. There is always a reason. Now, I'm not a huge fan of insects and creepy crawlies, that whole Del Toro thing. So I was never going to love this story because I just don't like creepy crawlies. But they really did try. They always have to fall back on the fact that there's a scientific explanation, because although Doctor Who does ghost stories, it also does its own version of truth. There'll always be a scientific explanation. There'll always be a reason for something happening. It won't just be, a bit weird, because that would leave us, the audience, who have some expectations, wanting. So whether they get brought back or not doesn't really come into it. But there'll always be, it's aliens, it's monsters. Now, I think the BBC, although they did definitely a great job on the Wooden Woman, which looked a lot like, obviously, the Wooden Woman from a few years back Christmas special. Perhaps they're related. Perhaps there's some sort of headcanon you can work out. Showing us the picture of her in the preview information probably wasn't the best idea. Because when I was creating the artwork for this particular podcast, I was scanning for some photographs I could use, and there was the publicity shot of the Wooden Woman. Now, the Wooden Woman, the mother, she was the surprise. She was, well, not the monster. Let's face it, the Landlord was the monster. The creatures were just aliens who were lost. What actually happened to them, I don't know. But don't you expect the Doctor to go away and have some sort of house built on the ruins, so that they would have somewhere to live as students, or at least sort them something out? Let's face it, the guy's a time traveller. He could nip back, buy a house, and rent it out to them. So if they are all living together in a completely different house at some point, that happens to be owned by the Doctor, and he becomes their landlord, well, that makes much more sense. Because let's face it, he's prone to nipping back in time. And now, of course, we have to deal with, well, the ongoing red herring type thing. And I know we've only got a couple of more weeks to deal with what's in the vault, because the storyline isn't what's in the vault, it's what's going to come out of the vault and what's going to happen then. Now, obviously, the standard fan received wisdom, and let's face it, this is the Tin Dog Podcast, home of received fan wisdom, is that it's going to be Missy, or the Master. Some people say that it's the partially regenerated Doctor, and the one on the outside is, well, I don't know, some sort of projection. I just don't think so. It's far too convoluted and a bit messy, because how would a projection travel through time, etc., etc., etc. Now, a rescued Doctor who's about to regenerate and then getting time back because he's holding back time makes a bit of sense, but it's a lot more messy. And let's face it, when push comes to shove, Doctor Who on TV doesn't do it that messy, because when it does, it all goes horribly wrong. See Pandorica. Yes, we did one day find out why the TARDIS exploded, but it took a very long time. You know, it all has to be fairly well sewn up. See my other podcasts about lying in science fiction, and the fact that it just doesn't usually happen. No, what we've got here is an Occam's razor of a thing. What's the most logical and dangerous thing, and the sort of thing who would play, I don't know, Pop Goes the Weasel, A Child's Rhyme, Mary Poppins, Missy. It makes sense. But is it too obvious? Probably. You know what? Speculating about this kind of nonsense doesn't help, because if you're right, you're right, and if you're wrong, you're wrong. It doesn't matter. It's already happened. It's already taken place. It's like an exploding star somewhere else. All you can do is watch. You can't alter it. It happened a long time ago. These stories have been made and they exist elsewhere. So, with that, I will say that this was a good story. I won't be watching it again for a long time because I just don't like creepy crawlies. Mind you, though, one thing I really can't stand is zombies. Oh, look at that next time trailer. Space zombies. Yes, I know that you've listened to me long enough to know that I don't like zombies. I like vampires, werewolves, all of those other creatures, all of the supernatural fun, because you can deal with them. They've got weaknesses. Zombies just keep coming. You can't stop them. Yes, they are a metaphor for the proletariat if you want to go down that road, because they're mindless and just want to eat. If you want to be all media studies about this sort of thing. Vampires, they're of course the upper class because they are the leeches that breed and take from the rest of society. They can make you one of them, but there's no going back. Yes, you can extend this metaphor for as far as you want, but that's not important. I don't like zombies. And next week's story, space zombies. Fantastic. So with that, I'll fade away and I'll let you go and watch Doctor Who. And I'll probably be back very shortly to talk about something else. So until then, be seeing you. That was the Doctor Who Tin Dog Podcast, available on iTunes, YouTube, Twitter, RSS, Vimeo, and across the internet. Doctor Who and its associated properties are all copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Why not become a supporter by visiting patreon.com/tindog. Contact the show on tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.